The Apprentice was a movie that I wanted to watch. Much like Joker Folie à Deux, I wanted to watch it in theaters when it came out. It came out kind of around the same time as Joker. But it was another one that, you know, I just couldn't get around to at that time, unfortunately. And, you know, those two movies I really regretted not getting to see. But I did watch The Apprentice last night, finally. I got around to it. And actually it was very cheap on Amazon. It really wasn't very expensive at all. The trailer for The Apprentice looked really good, which is why I wanted to watch it. And there was that character in the trailer who I just instantly latched onto. I thought he was so interesting, just the way this actor was playing him, Roy Cohn. And Roy Cohn is a name I had heard before. And I knew it had something to do with Donald Trump, but I didn't know anything about him. And then I thought about it, and I realized that I'd heard him mentioned in We Didn't Start the Fire by Billy Joel. He was one of those names. Actually, quite a lot of names that are connected to Roy Cohn were also mentioned in that song. But yeah, just the way this guy was playing him in the trailer, I thought, this guy's interesting. And so I decided to watch that documentary about him, which is on YouTube for free, called Where's My Roy Cohn? Don't know why it's called that. But I can't really vouch for the documentary as being an especially good work of documentary, but it was good. I don't think it was especially good. There are things that maybe it could have done better. But what was really great about it was the story itself that they presented. Because Roy Cohn actually is a really interesting person with a very interesting story. And seeing all that footage, that archival footage and interview footage of him in that documentary really kind of gets you to know this character. And so I really became fascinated by Roy Cohn from that. Another person who is in that documentary a lot, he's interviewed a lot for that documentary, is Roger Stone, and he's also a character in this movie, The Apprentice. And the reason the film is called The Apprentice, it's actually a really great title for the movie, because, you know, Donald Trump had that TV show, The Apprentice, of course, for years. But this movie is about him as an apprentice to Roy Cohn, basically. So he hires Roy Cohn as his lawyer, but they don't have a typical lawyer-client relationship. Instead, they have a mentor relationship where Roy Cohn, basically, he doesn't even really charge Donald Trump any money. He just wants to be Donald Trump's friend. And he'll do things for Donald Trump to be his friend, and then he'll also teach Donald Trump everything he knows about, you know, how to win. Because Roy Cohn is a lawyer who knows how to win. That's his thing. And so this is a movie all about the relationship between Donald Trump and Roy Cohn, which is why this movie needed to be made. And this is the thing about this, is, you know, if you hear like, oh, they're making a movie about Donald Trump in an election year where he happens to be running, like, the cynical side of your brain might think about that and be like, okay, how good is this movie going to be? It just seems like such a convenient way to, like, make money off of a big name in a big moment for that name. Make a movie about him. Like, how much effort are they really gonna put into telling a good story? But what I like is that, you know, this isn't just a biopic about Donald Trump. It's specifically a movie about this relationship between Donald Trump and Roy Cohn, which is a relationship that is actually really interesting and motion picture worthy, and something that, you know, when I saw that documentary, I thought, well, I actually really do want to see a drama about this. This is actually a really good story. So it was not a movie just made for the hell of it because they could. It was a movie that was made because there was actually a really good reason to make it, a really good dramatic reason to make it, to see this story, because it's a really good story. I want to start by talking about how this movie looks, because that's a very striking thing when you see the trailer. It's striking how they replicated the aesthetic of film stock from the 1970s or 80s, because that's when the movie takes place. It's got a grain to it, and it's a really pretty stock that they used. I don't know what they did to it to get it to look like that. It not only looks authentic to the period, it also just really looks good in itself. And the cinematography also is really good, because the cinematography has this candid quality to it, where there's a lot of handheld, and it kind of just feels like the camera is in the room. But at the same time, every shot feels very meticulously planned out. It feels very intentional. It doesn't just feel like they went for a style that was candid and then that allowed them to cut a lot of corners and not put a lot of effort into the presentation. No, every shot still feels very well thought out. It's just that it's immersive, and in a way it does kind of feel like archival footage at times, but not at all times. Sometimes it really does lean into the cinematic quality of it, and there are a few key moments like that, and when it does that, they really stand out. Like, my favorite shot in the movie was actually right at the beginning of the movie, where Donald Trump is in this club in New York. I don't know what club it was, and I don't know if we even know why he's there at first. I think it's the first scene in the movie. He shows up, it's at night, and he sits down at this table, and you just see this shot of Roy Cohn all the way at the other end of the room, just looking at him really intensely. And it's such a great way to introduce that character. And to see, like, Roy Cohn is a very well-connected man in this city. He knows who Donald Trump is just by looking at him. And this is, you know, before Donald Trump became the Donald Trump, the Donald. He knows who this guy is just by looking at him, and he takes a really strong interest in him for whatever reason. Right off the bat, he knows just instinctively that this person is important. And that's what starts their whole relationship in the movie. Just this very intense exchange of looks between them. And Roy Cohn does have a very intense face, and the actor really pulled that off. One of the things that's remarkable about this movie is the performances of the guy who played Donald Trump and the guy who played Roy Cohn. I don't even know, I've never heard of either of these actors. I don't know their names. I know that Trump is played by a guy named Sebastian something. But I thought both of them did such a great job at capturing the mannerisms of the characters they were portraying. Roy Cohn, when he talks, he has this sort of head bobble thing that he does, where he kind of pushes his neck out a little bit when he speaks. The actor just nailed that perfectly. That mannerism, he just replicated it exactly the way Roy Cohn used to do it, and that went so far in communicating this character. And just, you know, just the eyes. That's the thing about Cohn, is his eyes were just extremely contemptuous. He just looked like he hated everything. And that actor did a really good job at just acting with his eyes and giving you that feeling that this is a very contemptuous person, that this is a person who does not extend warm feelings very easily. And Donald Trump, I really liked the way that this guy played him, because he played the young Donald Trump, who was a lot less cartoony than the old version, where, you know, he's become this kind of grotesque parody of himself over time. He was a lot subtler in his youth, and he plays that really well. He gets the little mannerisms, like, you know, when he talks and he'll, like, raise his hands like this sometimes. to make a point. He'll get those little things about Trump, but he won't exaggerate it. And another thing that he's not doing a caricature. And another thing that I like is he pulls off this social awkwardness of Donald Trump so well, in a way that when you watch it in the drama form, it comes across differently, where it kind of gives him this sympathetic quality, where he feels like always this kind of, almost a sort of fish out of water all the time. Because he's surrounded by, in this movie, you know, especially like in that beginning scene when he first meets Roy is a great example of this. Because Roy, it's funny because Roy really shouldn't be able to get along with all these people, because he's this, well, he's a gay guy who's surrounded by just all of these, like, really, you know, I don't want to use the term homophobic, but yeah, homophobic people, these mobsters and stuff, these crime lords and businessmen who are, you know, these cigar chomping, whiskey drinking dudes. And he just looks like totally natural in that environment, even though he isn't. He doesn't really belong there. He's sort of absorbed himself into that world fully, where he can just sort of pretend to be straight, pretend to be something he's not. But you always know that something's up with him. But still, just the force of personality of him sort of stuffing all of that down and forcing himself to be something that he isn't, comes through, and he does it well. You can see he's very talented at this sort of grift that he's pulling all day, his whole life, just being a totally ruthless person with no scruples and no principles, and just slumming it with these other guys who are like that, because he can tell that even though they don't accept his sexuality, he doesn't accept it either. So that's something they have in common. They have everything in common with each other. But Donald Trump is different, and you see that really well communicated by this actor, and also by the director, the way he chooses to shoot different scenes of him. And you see this, if you pay attention to Trump, even as president, you see this too. He has this social awkwardness in this way when he's walking around. He just kind of looks like he's totally alone. Like nobody really understands him. Nobody really connects with him. And he's just sort of, he has this awkward shuffle with his gait, and he looks around just kind of like observing everything. And it always feels like he doesn't belong anywhere. No matter where he is, it's like he's this awkward sort of thing that's sticking out like a sore thumb. And it's like, how did this guy get here? And when you see it in real life, it's very easy to look at that and think, you know, look at what a dork this guy is. But when you see it in the movie, it does something different psychologically, where you, because he's the protagonist of this drama, you identify with that a bit, you relate to that a bit, and it becomes a sympathetic quality where you're like, wow, this guy kind of is a fish out of water. This guy looks uncomfortable, he looks kind of lost. But at the same time, it's subtle, because the text of the movie never really acknowledges that. The text of the movie is very, you know, Donald Trump is making every effort to be like Roy Cohn and to totally absorb himself into this world. The only thing that is acknowledged in the text is that Trump doesn't drink. And that's an important thing. That's an important thing that sets him apart from other people, is that they're all drinking all the time, and he's just kind of awkwardly like, nah, I don't want to do that. But of course Roy is like, hey, if you want to be my friend, you got to do this. Because, you know, you can't be my friend if you don't want to drink with me. And so he's like, All right. So he drinks a bunch of vodka, throws up a lot that night. There's another great scene that shows just how out of his element Trump is, where he goes to this party at Roy's house. I think it's at Roy's house. It could be somewhere else. I think it's at Roy's. Because Roy's house was also his office, which is an interesting thing about Roy Cohn, is that he worked in his house. Everyone just came to his house. He had this kind of office house, and he lived upstairs. Like his bedroom was upstairs, and it had this green carpet. It was a very peculiar looking room, and he would do his sit-ups there every day. He would exercise a lot, and he had this television with all of these frogs just all over the top of this television set. These little like frog trinkets and ornaments and knickknacks, which is really funny because of how Pepe the Frog became a kind of important symbol for Donald Trump later on. But yeah, it's just one of those peculiar things about him. He had this kind of eccentric quality.
And I think a big reason why he lived in his office like that was because he didn't have any interest really in having much of a private life, because I think he hated himself so much that he just kind of wanted his professional life, the only thing he really liked about himself, to kind of take up most of the space in his head and most of his time on this planet.
So anyway, Trump is at this party at Roy's, and it's clear that he just does not belong here. It's like this really crazy, wild, like people are doing coke and fucking everywhere. Andy Warhol is there, and he doesn't even recognize Andy Warhol. And it's funny because they don't say his name in the movie. It's just a guy who's done up to look exactly like Andy Warhol. So it's really funny when he's like, so what do you do? And he's like, I'm an artist. And he's like, oh, do you make a lot of money off of it? And he's like, yeah, I do. I'm successful. But he clearly has no idea who this guy is. And then at one point he's like, where's Roy? Because he's just lost in this whole crazy, weird environment that's kind of freaking him out. And he's like, where's Roy? And someone says, I think he went upstairs. Now, if you know anything about Roy Cohn, you would know, okay, this is the time to just go home. Because if Roy Cohn went upstairs during a party, you know what's going on. But Trump is so naive that he doesn't know what's going on. And so you watch him go upstairs, and this whole time, if you know what's coming, you're like, oh my God, what is he gonna see? And then it's actually really cool the way the movie does it, because it really pulls no punches at all. The door's like already kind of creaked open, and he just kind of pushes it open. Immediately, he sees this gay orgy going on, and Roy Cohn is on the bed just getting fucked vigorously in the ass. And it's like, it's actually shocking the way it's presented, and it puts you in Trump's shoes, just the way it's so uncompromisingly like done. It's meant to kind of shock you, like, whoa. And then he just kind of, he shuts the door again, and then he walks away, and that scene's never acknowledged again. There's no, you never really know what he thought in that moment. You never really get to know what Trump thought about Roy Cohn's sexuality or any of that, or his hypocrisy in that way. The only times that ever kinda comes up again is near the end of the movie when Roy Cohn is dying of AIDS. And Trump is kind of distancing himself from him, but it's like, you never get the sense that it's him being gay part that Trump had a problem with, more that it was the AIDS thing. That was kind of, it looked bad, and he wanted to distance himself from this guy who had AIDS. But yeah, they showed everything that I would have wanted to see in a movie like this. Like, all the really important moments, like, they showed Roy's collection of tapes that because he recorded all of his conversations. And so he had this massive kind of collection of these tapes in this cellar of his that had, like, dirt on everyone in town that he could use as blackmail. They showed that. They did a really good job at putting in the right things at the right spots. But yeah, what I was saying about that, how you never get a sense of, like, what does he think about all this? That's something interesting about Trump and about the way he's portrayed in this movie that I think is very true to life. For Trump, everything was image. Whatever kind of genuine thoughts and feelings he had never mattered. It was all about winning. And you see that in his private life as much as in his public life. Like, even when his brother dies, he refuses to cry, even though he can't help himself but cry. And when his wife is trying to comfort him, he's like, no, don't touch me, don't look at me. I don't want you to see me like this. And so, like, it's like this is a guy who never wanted to be a real person, in a way. He only wanted to be this success story. And you see a little bit about why that might be, about his dad, and how his dad was kind of tough on him and tough on his brother. Like, his brother was a pilot and his dad thought that was an embarrassment for some reason. And so Trump didn't want that to happen to him, and so he went into real estate like his dad. And the dad is portrayed kind of interestingly too, because you see him over the course of the movie slowly get humbled to Trump, where he starts out as this tough sort of kind of like a mafia businessman. And then at a certain point, his son just kind of stops taking shit from him and is like, look, you're gonna do this my way, not because it's the right thing to do, but because it's happening and I'm already putting stuff in motion, and if you don't want to look like a clown, you're gonna go along with it. And Trump just kind of takes over. Donald Trump just kind of takes over, and his dad eventually is like, hey, I mean, my son is connected to, the most powerful men in the city, like Roy, even more than I am. And then, like, toward the end of the movie, you see, like, his dad is starting to kind of become really feeble. It's weird, the personality shift in him, and it feels very real. Like, there's something about it that feels like almost too real. The way he's just sitting there watching TV, and then his son comes in to try to get him to sign these papers that have to do with, like, scamming his siblings out of their trust fund, basically, so that he can afford to pay for these casinos or whatever he's doing. And Fred Trump is just kind of, it's like he just wants to see the best in his kid and doesn't have that, like, sharp mind of a businessman anymore. And he's totally changed. It's almost like he went through a stroke or something. They don't show him having a stroke in the movie, but that's the impression that you get. It's like something happened to this guy's brain where he's just no longer a businessman at all anymore. He's like totally wimped out, and he's like, oh, this is about the trust? Oh, okay, Donald. Yeah, you want me to sign that? It's like he has no critical thinking skills anymore. And I thought that was very interesting, how there's developments going on with this character that you don't even see. But he just changes throughout the film. The whole AIDS arc was really well done. By the way, I liked how they would recreate classic interviews. Like, I'd seen a few of the interviews that they recreated, like when Roy Cohn was on TV and the guy was like, okay, when are you going to admit that you're gay and you have AIDS? And he's like, I'm not gay, I don't have AIDS. And then there was The one from the early 80s that's really famous with Trump in front of that window. They recreate that where he's like talking about the possibility of becoming president in the future. But yeah, the whole AIDS arc was interesting the way it's shown, because you know, when it first starts, Roy Cohn is going with Trump to Atlantic City to look at the city and talk about the casinos that Trump wants to build there. And Roy is just totally pessimistic about it. He doesn't want Trump to invest in casinos in Atlantic City. And he has all these reasons, some of which are reasonable, some of which are just kind of like him being, you know, very pessimistic. And Donald is just kind of like, what are you doing, dude? Why are you so tense? Why are you so negative? But you can tell that it's because this stuff is weighing on the back of his head and the back of his mind, weighing on him. That, you know, his friend Russell has AIDS, and that he might also have AIDS because of that. And so it's like, it's kind of the beginning of the end for that character. And there's this great moment where Roger Stone is talking to Trump in his office, and Roger Stone reveals the fact that Russell has AIDS, which Trump didn't know because Roy only said that he had pneumonia. So Roy lied to Trump. And it's very well done the way this scene was acted, because you can tell that Trump just does not care at all that Russell has AIDS. Like, Russell means absolutely nothing to him. But if anything, he's just a little bit mad at Roy for lying to him about it. He also doesn't really know what AIDS is. He doesn't know how it's transferred. And so you can tell he's worried about like his relationship with Roy. Like, am I going to get AIDS if I spend all this time with Roy? And so all that's going through his head as Roger Stone is telling him this. And he has to like pretend to be sad about it. And it's so obviously disingenuous. He's like, wow, yeah, that's tough. It's not good. Oh, gee. It's just very well acted, that scene. And there's a part after that where they have this big blow up between Donald and Roy that happens, you know, out on the street. And you can see like Roy is really upset because he feels that Donald has betrayed him by evicting Russell from his hotel, which was a favor as a friend to a friend, you know, who they didn't charge each other money really for these favors. It was a friendship relationship, and Donald is just going back on all that. He's just like, no, get this guy out of my hotel. But you see he's all offended about this. Roy's all offended about this. He's sad, he's betrayed. And Donald is just pointing out to him that it's like, oh, what? So you have feelings now? You have a heart now? I mean, aren't you the guy who has just been brazenly the most evil man in New York City and not giving a damn about anything other than winning? That's what you taught me. And now, like, all of a sudden I'm supposed to, you know, cry a bunch of tears over your feelings? Like, give me a fucking break. And you can see both sides of it, how, yes, Donald Trump is being a really bad friend in this situation. And he shouldn't be doing this, because this is really selfish and greedy and evil. And yet, this is all they do. This is all that Donald was trained to do by Roy, is to just be totally avaricious and totally greedy and break every rule in the book to win. And so it's like, you know, you can't really feel bad for Roy, and yet you kind of do, because it's like, if anything, if Roy had anything, at least he had this friendship, and now, you know, it's been kind of thrown away. So it's just a great movie about disingenuousness. It's a great movie about the sort of conflict between being a human being and being a winner, and being a businessman. and how these two things are just very incompatible with each other. And you even see Donald doing things to himself to make him less human, like taking these amphetamines that he convinces himself are not drugs, but they are, and getting all this surgery to make himself look better. Like, you see them like cutting open his scalp and stapling it together to get rid of his bald spot. You see them like taking liposuctioning the fat out of his body because he doesn't want to diet and lose weight. He just wants to take the easy route. You see them like surgically altering this guy's body to get rid of signs of aging. Because he really has a lot of insecurity about this, because it's all about image for him, and so they're just like making him very artificial as part of just his losing his humanity. Every scene in the movie like that serves the themes of the film. The one part that I thought was maybe a little bit on the nose was when his wife is yelling at him and calling him old and ugly. But the one remark that really sets him off, that makes him attack her, is when she calls him balding. That's when he's like, balding? I am not balding. And I thought, is that just a little bit too much of an in-joke about Trump's hair and how he has that comb over? I don't know if that's something that actually happened. But I thought maybe if it didn't happen like that, if there's no evidence that it happened like that, it's a little bit on the nose. But yeah, overall, really great movie, a story that needed to be told. I loved it. It was exactly what I wanted it to be, which is always great in a movie.